Hi, y'all, and welcome back to Katie Q's Astro News. So, I was gone for a little bit. I skipped the last Astro News after my vacation to the beach. I was super exhausted and I felt like I needed a little bit of a break, but I'm back in time for a big one this time. I'm going to be talking about a solar eclipse or a new moon in sidereal Cancer, and it's going to be happening in the star Ashlesha nakshatra, also known as the Hydra. So this Wednesday, which I think is August 12th, right around the afternoon, we're going to be having a solar eclipse, and not everybody will be able to see the solar eclipse, and it's a partial, it's not exact, but if you live pretty far north in the United States, if you're in New England or if you're in Canada, you may be able to see it since it's happening in the afternoon. But as for the rest of us, this energy is still very potent and very powerful, and so it's worth discussing today. So I've actually already talked about this sign Ashlesha before during the snow moon earlier this year, and so I won't be redundant in getting into the nitty-gritty details of Ashlesha this time, but if you yourself are Ashlesha or you're just curious about this nakshatra in particular, I'll try to link that video down below for you, and so you can get a little bit more details about the star. But today there's actually a lot of interaction happening with the outer planets, with Jupiter, Saturn, and even Neptune. And so I'm going to be taking a more broad and holistic approach to this eclipse today. Yeah, if you're curious about Ashlesha in particular, because usually I like to get into the details of the stars, then I will link that other video down below. So like I was saying, this solar eclipse is going to be happening in the sign of Cancer in sidereal astrology. In fact, it's going to be happening at the Hydra constellation, and it's not happening quite at the Gondanta point, but I really want to talk about Gondanta a little bit here again, and I'm hoping to make a graphic this time about it because the lunar mansions or the nakshatras are actually more specific than the zodiac signs because there's 27 of them instead of 12. But the Gondanta points are referring to the stages of the zodiac. So you have three major stages ruled by the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer, and each of the points in between the sections is called a Gondanta, which means a knot. It's a tie in between the Mercury-ruled nakshatras, Ashlesha, Jyeshta, and Revati, and the Ketu-ruled nakshatras, Ashwini, Magha, and Mula. And each of these stages of life is very important. You can think of it as stages sort of in the grand scheme, but they also apply to our own life. Since the South Node, or Ketu, which rules the other half of these Gondanta points, is going to be involved in this eclipse, I felt like it was really important to discuss this particular Gondanta between Ashlesha nakshatra and Magha nakshatra. Ashlesha is symbolized by the coiled serpent, and the coiled serpent has a lot to do with Kundalini energy, which is our own sexual energy, but also our life force energy that is twisted around the base of our spine. And it's cold, it's dormant, it's constricted, and it has to be activated and maintained to be able to be useful for us. Whereas on the other side of this Gondanta, where Ketu or the South Node is sitting, is in Magha, the awakening of the Kundalini and the sexual energy. And it reminds me of the feeling of being a teenager and you're dating, you're active in sports and competing with people, and you're really starting to find yourself. You're starting to find your own ego, your own inner light, your own solar light. However, K2 in the South Node is also a shadow planet, and there's no other planets in Magha or Leo right now or aspecting the sign. So we're really in these cold, watery placements in Cancer and in Pisces, which is representative of that point right before the expansion that we will be going into later in this year of the solar light, of celebration, of joy, and awakening into this new era that we've all been moving towards. But with Ashlesha and also some of the other outer planets that I'm going to discuss later, we have this sort of ancient energy where we have our own memories, our own familial patterns and even ancestral patterns that are kind of stored in our DNA and our epigenetics that are not really serving us anymore and need to be cleansed and shed to be freed so we can awaken into our own true personal energy that will help us create in this next cycle. Like I said, we have a huge new cycle happening with this fire horse year. Last year was the snake year, and so we are really shedding our skin. And I think that this eclipse this time is really honed in and focused on getting rid of all those archaic old programs that happen in the background that we might not even be aware of anymore. Ashlesha can make us very stiff, very cold and like creaky, and especially during the snow moon and the winter time, that can be really difficult. But even here in the northern hemisphere, at least, it's summer and I still personally feel very achy, very tight, very stiff. And so we may be tempted also with, like I said, Saturn is in Pisces right now, so is Neptune, and they're both retrograde. And we have Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer in the sign Pusha, which is also ruled by Saturn. We are all probably feeling extremely exhausted and wanting to cozy up in our shell, but I would actually urge everybody to stay in a state of flow and movement, because with this extra yin, with this extra cold, contracting feminine energy, it can be very dangerous to just continue to rest or oversleep or miss out on any exercise plans or any usual movement that you would have, because the overabundance of yin can create a lot of muscle tension, and the fascia, like I was saying in that Ashlesha video before, can get really tight and sticky and create knots in our body that can be a real pain in the ass once they've already set in. So even if you're feeling tired, even if you're feeling stiff, I would recommend staying in the flow, doing gentle movements, especially any sort of dance or anything that or like yoga that allows your spine to sort of move around. Like I said, kind of awakening this coiled serpent within us instead of keeping it cold and constricting. Ashlesha is also ruled by the planet Mercury, and Wednesday is actually Mercury Day as well. And if you think of Wednesdays in general, it's a day where you've really gotten into the habit of working and your mind is really active and you're planning for the rest of the week ahead. And Ashlesha is also very anxious and a little bit protective. It's still fully in the sign of Cancer. And so they can be very aware, overly aware even, and protective of themselves. And so that sort of mental anxiety can also create that muscle tension. And believe it or not, that tension can create energy leaks in our aura because we are so tense. Our muscles are ambiently constricting and tense, and we're losing energy without us even knowing it because our body is kind of in a constant state of contraction. It may feel a little counterintuitive if you're really tight and if you're really tired, but actually moving gentle motions, especially walking or running, that gets energy shaken up, that sort of energy can really help to shake up and loosen some of these knots and ties that are within our body, within our energy field, and can release them. That way they can actually flow, and you will actually feel more restful and more peaceful after exercising and removing these energy leaks, like I said, where we have this unknown tension. And this tension is also reflective of our mental space. So also, if you can, after a good walk or run or exercise or yoga, spending a little time journaling or voice recording, Mercury also rules the voice, to just kind of think of any emotions that come up or any places where you feel stuck. That can also help to alleviate some anxiety that will keep you from feeling just ambiently stuck and tired. So if any of y'all keep up with astrology, either Western or sidereal astrology, you may know that Saturn is retrograde, and so is Neptune in sidereal Pisces. And Saturn is actually retrograde in the final sign Revati, which is a trine to this solar eclipse where the sun and moon are both in Ashlesha at the end of Cancer. Revati is also a Gandanta sign, and so it's a Gandanta with Ashwini, the very first sign, because Revati is the very last sign. And Revati in particular is very associated with timelessness, and Saturn is Chronos, it's time. It is the very gravitational force that is representative of the fourth dimension or time in our solar system. And so with Saturn being retrograde in the sign Pisces, especially Revati, it can honestly sometimes feel like time is completely standing still, that there is absolutely no movement at all. So with this Saturn retrograde aspecting with a trine, this eclipse, I think that it's an incredibly important time to slow down, to savor this moment and spend this time reflecting, because it won't stay slow forever. And we've also had a lot of newness and a lot of very quick changes and forward moving action at the beginning of this year. So instead of staying in that hyper speed, this is a really great time to reflect back on anything you might not have had enough time to sort of think about and consider from the beginning of the year. This is a time where any sort of manifestations or any especially tedious work, anything very physical and literal like business, work, any very tangible plans can go really slowly. It doesn't mean that they're not moving forward, it's just that they are moving extremely slowly. And so instead of feeling impatient and wasting this time, like I said, this is a really important time to reflect. And if you're somebody who is spiritual, this is also an incredibly important time to pray and to meditate, because we might not have this sort of time and access in the future, because also the planet Neptune is retrograde right now as well, and it's retrograde also in Pisces, but it's in mid Pisces in the sign Uttara Bhadrapada. I feel like I've talked about Uttara Bhadrapada a lot this year. Neptune retrograde is a very interesting energy because it is a very ephemeral, mystical, imaginative, otherworldly planet to begin with. It is sometimes the farthest planet away from us and away from the sun. It trades places back and forth with Pluto being the furthest away. And so once it goes retrograde, its energy is still very similar, but it allows us to have a deeper connection with the divine, a deeper connection to our own inner psyche and our own inner world. This is a really important time for anyone, like I said, who is spiritual, to commune with the divine, with God, however you see God, and really try to take in any messages that you can, anything that you might not have time for. Like I said, you might not have had time at the beginning of the year, but things will pick up again, especially after December, once Saturn goes direct again. So the second half of the year, as the sun is waning into darkness here in the northern hemisphere, it is a really good time to sit back and really appreciate the stillness rather than fighting against it. So Neptune in Uttara Bhadrapada is actually trine the planet Jupiter, which is conjunct Mercury, and both Jupiter and Mercury are in Cancer, in mid-Cancer, in the sign Pusha. And Pusha is considered the most auspicious sign. It's ruled by Saturn, and it's a little different than Ashlesha. Ashlesha at the end of Cancer is very finicky, very particular, even a bit cold. I said in my last video, it's a lot like the dark mother or the dark moon, and has a lot of edge and sharpness to it. But Pusha, on the other hand, is ruled by Saturn and reminds me of kind of the hard protective shell of the crab, or of a mother, or of a family unit. However, although it is an auspicious sign, and it's also the exaltation point for the benefic, merciful Jupiter, its rulership being Saturn makes it a very strict and hard-nosed type of a placement. And I really do think that this Mercury-Jupiter conjunction here, like I said, with Jupiter's exaltation point, is a really important theme alongside this eclipse in Ashlesha, because I think that sometimes we can mistake what is actually good for us, what is actually a blessing, or what is an illusion, and what is actually not necessarily serving us, or is a program, or is some sort of false identity that no longer serves and again needs to be shed. And with Saturn as well here ruling the sign Pusha, I also think it shows how sometimes the best rewards are also delayed. And this time even though it is auspicious and even though it's important, it can sometimes sort of test us to make sure that our intentions are pure and that what we are asking for and manifesting is actually for our greatest good, for our lifetime, for our descendants, as well as for all the people around us. Because, like I said, Pusha and Ashlesha are in the sign of Cancer, which has to do with family, the home, your homeland, your body, your soul. So these are much deeper concepts than, your bank account or your ego. It is sometimes a bit of a challenge to acknowledge that perhaps the things that we have been looking for aren't necessarily in our best interest. And with this sort of Gondanta, like I said, the sort of liminal space that comes up, especially with Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, you can see the veil sort of thinning, not just between, this realm and other realms, but between our own soul, our own eternal soul, our own eternal self, and the little us that, we kind of make up with our everyday sort of task, like who we are as our social role in our family or our job. We can sort of override and identify with that and lose sight of our bigger self. And so this is a great opportunity to really recalibrate and redirect ourselves towards what is actually the best for us. And this energy is super intense in general. A lot of people I know, including myself, I'm in a huge transition right now, and a lot of people are hitting big milestones, whether it has to do with birth or moving or getting new careers, huge shifts, even the more negative things such as sickness. It really makes you contemplate the grander scheme of things, but at the same time, these huge shifts and huge energy, they also attract our shadows. Like the light really brings out our shadows and also shadowy forces. And so it's really important to stay still, like I was saying, like to meditate, to really think about things and try not to make any big decisions right now. Stay moving, like I said, stay moving, keep your body lubricated, but probably not the best time to make any big decisions or make any new moves or anything like that. Just allow anything that's already in the process to sort of shake out. With this sort of mercurial energy, with Mercury coming in conjunction with Jupiter and these blessings that are coming down from God, as well as its Mercury's influence over Ashlesha, the cold, constricting, judgmental yin energy can also make you miss your blessings. And I'm not trying to fearmonger you or anything like that, but it can be so tight and so controlled of an energy that you can sometimes literally like deny your blessings from coming in because you can't see the bigger picture, especially any old patterns that come from programming from your childhood, especially from your mother's side of the family, because these things can go really far back. I mean, you have no idea what's laying in your DNA and your epigenetics in your ancestral line that could be holding you back and you don't even realize it. And these sort of ancient patterns, these same old unconscious habits that we have are hard to break. They really are. They're very ingrained and they precede us. So in a lot of ways, some of us have never experienced anything outside of the same repeated pattern. So that's why it's so important to be able to be open to experiencing, even if the expansion from Jupiter is expanding into your awareness, the places where you've gone wrong, or you're manifesting something and experiencing something that you don't want, that isn't very pleasant. Try to still think of it as a blessing and not an insult. And just kind of circling back a little bit, like I said, talking about K2 is in Leo. It's in the sign Maga right now, which is ruled by K2 or the South Node. And just a little shout out to K2 in sidereal astrology. Although it is a shadow planet, K2 represents spirituality, detachment, hidden talents, and power, our own interpersonal power, because it's what has come from our past life, from our lineages, from our ancestors, that we are strong with and that we are very comfortable with. And so, as opposed to the North Node, which in Western astrology, a lot of people say that you should be moving towards your North Node. I know, I'm sorry, I feel like I've said this before, but those of you who haven't heard before, but Rahu, or the North Node, is malefic. It is negative. It is obsessive. It is very attached to Maya, or, the matrix, the material world, and illusion. And so following your North Node can act, because it's so unfamiliar and kind of has that shiny object syndrome for people, actually leads you further into darkness. It leads you further into attachment and obsession as you sort of try to grasp onto something that cannot be held. The healing side of K2 is that it allows you to detach and to feel true fulfillment and satisfaction with what you already are and what you already have, especially with this Cancer energy, like I said, and the sort of motherly, ancestral, archaic, memory-based energy that's coming up. We are moving into Maga soon. A lot of the planets will soon move into Maga, especially towards the end of the year. And so it will be activating the positive sides of what our ancestors have already conquered, or if you believe in past lives, what you've already conquered, or in your own past lives, depending on your age, what you've already experienced and become strong in this life. I always like to say my little piece about that, about how K2 is actually quite healing, because it's our true self and our true soul, and aligning into wholeness is more important than just constantly trying to get on that sort of self-development or manifestation and reaching sort of energy that is truly quite malefic, and especially during a time now of overconsumption, and people are deeply unsatisfied and have these gaping holes and wounds that could be filled up with their own light, their own solar light from Leo, and their own energy that becomes its own sort of efficient, self-fulfilling cycle within. And Ashlesha, actually, in my other video, I talked about how they have the power to poison, and they're associated with snakes, and snakes have that venom. But snakes are also a part of the caduceus, if you think in like the medical field, and they are associated with healing and anti-venom and antitoxins, and this Gandanta, in my opinion, between Maga, which is a very alchemical sign. It's associated with the Magi, by the way. I can't wait to talk about Maga a little bit more later this year. It's associated with the Magi, the three wise men, actually, that go and visit Jesus at his birth, and they come with their alchemical gold and their frankincense and myrrh, which are all cleansing, clearing, and protective talismans that they're bringing to baby Jesus. Ashlesha, which can be very cold, constricting, and poisoning, but as we awaken this energy within us and become aware of our own inner light, I know this is kind of deep, but seriously, as we become awakened to our own inner light, we sort of nourish ourselves from within with our own personal energy, with our own K2, our own talents, and we don't have to reach outside to other people's light and sort of try on all these different masks and try to take other people's light. Instead, we have our own unique light that fulfills us fully and naturally. And the healing is physical. It's very literal. It's the Kundalini, which is sexual energy. Like I said, it has to do with the chakra points in the body and the chi, but it's also a mental healing, like the ways that we keep ourselves stuck and the patterns and mental patterns that we keep going on in a circle about, that can be really shed and enlightened at this time. There's just a couple of other things I wanted to say. There's a meteor shower that's happening as well, so go out and wish on a shooting star after the eclipse, because it'll be a new moon, so it will be really easy to see with the dark moon energy. Also, just a little tidbit about Venus. Venus is in Hasta, and that's in mid-Virgo, and that's Venus's debilitation point. So Jupiter is exalted right now, but Venus is debilitated. So once again, I would just really shy away from focusing too much on the material successes of life, on money, on those sort of practical things, and also try to embrace a little bit of delayed gratification and things too. Venus rules the senses and the enjoyment and bliss we get from the senses, and it is just not happy here in Hasta. It doesn't like being in Virgo. Virgo is very particular. They like to bring up their little rules and contracts, and Venus is not a big fan of that. And Jupiter, the greater benefic, has boons and blessings that are much more associated with the spiritual realm, with enlightenment, again with K2 and spirituality and that detachment from things, from the senses, and finding a sort of internal inner bliss, if you will, which it sounds a little woo-woo, but you know, it is, after all, what we're here to do is search for moksha, or salvation, to be free of suffering, to be free of attachment, believe it or not, is actually, it's a great thing. It feels great. So that's pretty much what I have for y'all. So yeah, just getting down to the brass tacks, getting into the more practical advice after kind of overviewing all the planets and what's going on. Like I said, we've got Saturn retrograde, Neptune retrograde, and sidereal Pisces, really slowing down time, but also in that liminal, back rooms, odd place where there is a timelessness. We also have that opportunity to reflect and to really think about the eternal, our future, long future, and our long past, our descendants and our ancestors, and the connection between all of those versions of ourselves. We also have our Jupiter and Mercury are together in Pusha, the most auspicious sign, the exaltation point of Jupiter. And so the boons are much more familial, they're much more soul tribe based, they're much more about true emotional satisfaction. K2 is sitting in Maga on the other side of the Gandanta of this eclipse happening in Ashlesha. And so really thinking about ways that we are stuck and stagnant in old patterns and our bodies are stiff and tight in this a coiled, cold serpentine way, and thinking about how we can warm ourselves up and stay in the flow to prepare for our own inner light to come forward so we can celebrate and create in a new way in this new era. Awakening our inner talents and how we can actually give back and serve. So some of my practical advice is that somatic work, tapping, yoga, dancing, walking, stretching, even heavier stuff like weightlifting, anything that activates the body and gets you out of that cold, constrictive energy is really important right now. And then if you can, follow it up with a little bit of investigative work or using your voice, whether it's voice recording, journaling, or even art, doing any painting, writing, poetry, anything that allows you to contemplate anything that came up as you loosen up that fascia and any of the emotions that surface from that, doing some investigative work and really meditating on it, taking a long walk, and then coming back and really sitting for 10 to 20 minutes before you move on to anything else is really important too. Cleaning your space is a very practical way to use this energy, especially using like the condo process and seeing, does this actually bring you joy? Is this something that you want to bring into this next era? Is this aligned with your true self or what you're moving towards? Or is it something that can be shed or reminds you of an old errors from a person that you don't really resonate with anymore? Just go ahead and let it go. Free up some space, shed that snake skin. Also, Ashlesha is a very beautiful sign. It's very lunar. Cancer is a beautiful sign as well with the moon energy. And although Venus is debilitated right now, any sort of practical beauty rituals, especially things like a body scrub or a soak with bath salts that leaves you feeling like renewed and like your skin is like fresh, like I said, like shedding that snake skin. But also anything like a lymphatic facial massage or body massage, even if you go and pay for it, helping to drain any of that stuck water energy or stuck fluid that is like clinging to your bones, having help moving that out could be very useful right now too. Also things like a clay mask, like putting on a clay mask and doing your nails, especially at home. It's very meditative, but try not to mindlessly binge watch like reality TV or listen to a podcast. This is really not a good time at all to engage with any slop content or meeting new people or anything aggravating to the nervous system, especially anything that makes you fearful of the future, because again, this is a very timeless, stagnant time where if you're anxious, it will just get trapped in the body. So I would really recommend maybe just listening to a favorite album, something that's not going to shock you or bring you out of the moment, or better yet, just open your window, listen to the bird song or the night song, and just be with your own thoughts. I would highly recommend protecting your mental health right now. And if whatever you do, I know not all my men watching, not everybody wants to sit and like do their nails nails. But whatever you do, you know, if you're cleaning, I know a lot of people like to listen to stuff in the background, what have you, but try not to. If you can, try to just sit with the silence. I know it's uncomfortable, or with people, comfortable people that you know and trust, instead of just adding to the anxiety by bringing in a lot of new information. And along that, I would really, like I said, avoid any shallow connections as well, or meeting new people, or like doing anything out of your comfort zone. It'll probably feel very disturbing. I would also like to reiterate, it's not really a great time to focus on the material world, and try to instead focus on your inner world, your inner talents, and any blockages actually that come up to your inner peace without regard to anything around you. Ashlesha is not necessarily a sign that's prone to overconsumption, like I was saying with like Swati and some of the other signs. And in fact, actually, the energy right now is quite dry and restrictive. And so more so, I would be wary of being too controlling and trying to do too much. Like I said, that sort of midweek, mercurial, obsessive energy and really trying to control things, I would recommend against that. So that's pretty much what I have for you guys. I'm so happy to be back. Like I said, I am in the midst of a transition, and so there's a lot of things changing, but I do still have so many plans for AstroNews and like doing some other stuff in the future, but I got to get a little bit settled first. But either way, if you guys are still here and enjoyed this video, thank you so much. I love you all so much, and please take care during this eclipse. You should still rest, but like I said, just break it up with some movement and we'll get through this. Many blessings to you all. I love you so much. Bye.